Great to be talking with everyone, and I'm really excited to be talking to you about Postman in the enterprise. And given that it's one of the first non-keynote sessions of the day, actually, what I thought I'd do is give you all both a little bit of background on sort of why Postman's relevant in the enterprise at all, and then a tour of some of the really interesting sessions that are relevant to kind of enterprise adoption and use cases of Postman. And then, so we'll do a tour of the conference, so to speak, with relation to the enterprise, and then also have some time at the end for more general Q&A. So let's go to the next slide. So I'm Sanjeev Sisodiya. I lead the customer success team here at Postman. I've been here for just over 3 years, and when I started, we were less than 50 people, and I think it's been an amazing journey since then. We're well over 300 people now, so more than tripled, 5 or 6x in the last 3 years. And as I said in kind of my early morning kickoff, the most amazing thing about Postman really is the community. And one of the reasons I was so excited to join the company is that it's fantastic to be responsible for customer success when the organization is so community driven. So I felt like there's a strong alignment between how Postman has grown very organically with broad-based adoption across the world, and aligning that with continuing to try to make both individual developers and larger organizations successful as they work with APIs. So when you think about customer success at Postman, what actually do we mean by customer? And there's a couple of different definitions, right? There's the customer as as the developer. And Postman got its start as a REST client extraordinaire, right, in 2012. And there's the pun dad joke already on slide whatever we're on 4 here. And as they say, the rest is history. And to the extent that when I started at Postman, one of the things that made me most excited was, at the time, I think we were saying there's 5 million registered users on Postman. Well, fast forward 3 years later, and now there's 14 million developers using Postman. And so again, the scale of adoption really has been fantastic, and allows us to kind of learn from this huge community about what's important not only to individuals, but also to the organizations that they work in, right? And of course, there are a lot of individual developers using Postman and tinkering with APIs in kind of their own personal projects and personal contexts. But we saw actually from very early on, starting almost immediately, but with some significant uptick in 2013, just a year into the history, that Postman was already being used in large enterprises. And in fact, Abhinav, the CEO, has a really interesting anecdote that he tells. The first $500 that Postman ever made was from a company up in the Washington, Seattle area that actually sent Abhinav a check for $500 because they were getting so much value out of Postman, and they didn't know that there was no online payment. We didn't have the Stripe integration. I don't think the Stripe API existed at the time, or at least in a broadly used form. So in fact, the first dollars that Postman ever got were from an enterprise. And again, sort of following the fast forward journey, we now see Postman usage across 98% of the Fortune 500. And again, that's both a testament to kind of the nature of Postman as a developer first tool, but also the breadth of how widely used and how important APIs are. So that's interesting. Lots of enterprises use Postman, but what I really wanted to dive into today and sort of provide a roadmap for you all for the rest of the conference is where we see kind of those core enterprise use cases, so to speak. It's really important to see kind of the set of people that have been adopting Postman as a core part of their internal API and developer tooling. This is one of our beauty boards, our logo boards. And you'll see many of the customers that are listed on here actually have speaking sessions and speakers presenting at Galaxy. So, I'd encourage you to kind of spend some time understanding these enterprise use cases for Postman, so that if you're part of a large organization, you can not only think about how your immediate team is using Postman, but potentially other ways that it might be more applicable more broadly in the organization. So to get into that, the real question is, okay, so we see a lot of usage in the enterprise, but why? What are they doing with Postman beyond the individual developer use case? And so what we actually did is we had a consulting analyst firm talk to a whole set of our customers. And this is the obligatory Postman solves world hunger slide. But as developers, we all tend to be skeptical, and I was a developer myself for a long period of time in my career. All tend to be skeptical of kind of these bold claims of productivity increases. But the truth of the matter is that I think the API ecosystem is both so important and so interconnected, and even today with Postman and other tools, very underserved from a tooling perspective. Specifically targeted at APIs. There's obviously great tooling for developers down at the source code level, IDEs, all kinds of things. But the API tooling, I think, is just now starting to catch up with the opportunity. And so there's a lot of headroom for using tooling to actually accelerate the kind of work. So if you're interested in more of the details around the bold marketing claims here, definitely take a look at that Enterprise Strategy Group report. But more importantly, what I'd like to walk you through is kind of what we've learned as a group of people at Postman who listen to and talk to our enterprise customers, where they see enterprise use cases. And then I'll also point you to, for each of the use cases, specific talks coming up at Galaxy today and tomorrow, where you can actually dive in and learn a lot more directly from other organizations rather than just hearing from the Postman team itself. As we've been listening to organizations, we kind of see 6 areas where Postman's adopted beyond the individual developer, right? As a scaled up capability that organizations deploy for specific functions and outcomes. They're not too surprising once you kind of step back and look at the API ecosystem and the API lifecycle. They span developer experience, API quality, security, governance, and integrations. And then what we're also starting to see is a few of our larger customers really adopt Postman as a platform across this entire set of stops along the API lifecycle. And do that not only for internal developers who are producing APIs, but also for external users and consumers. And sometimes those producers and consumers of the APIs are inside your organization, and sometimes they're outside. And Postman has sort of tooling that helps with internal documentation. And then, as you saw at the keynote today, we're also spending a lot of time thinking about how to enable developer experience at scale through things like public workspaces. So the first one to talk about really is developer experience. And as I said, developer experience doesn't just mean your public developer portal. In fact, what we hear from a lot of our customers, and I imagine many of you experience the same thing, the vast majority of APIs are internal to your organization. And so the first sort of deep vein that we hear a lot of customers talk about is starting to use not only Postman collections, but Postman workspaces as a single source of truth for their APIs. And then as an extension of that, once you've got this sort of single source of truth and a place to go understand which APIs exist, how they evolve, how they're documented, then that next step of bringing external developers, whether those are external developers in a different division within your organization or outside your organization, bringing them onto the platform becomes that much easier. So this is a heavily populated track here at Postman. So you can, in fact, the first one on this list you're actually missing right now. So the principal developer evangelist at Salesforce is talking about how Salesforce uses public workspaces to onboard developers. One that I'd highly recommend a little bit later today is Stuart Clark from Cisco, talking about how Cisco is making this massive transition to API first within their organization, how they're using Postman as a key part of their developer and onboarding curriculum, both for internal folks at Cisco, Cisco partners. Cisco does a huge amount of their business through partners and their ecosystem. They use Postman as a key part of their training stack for APIs. And then there's a great sort of group session with developer advocates from Dropbox and Vonage and Twitter, some of whom you saw in the keynote video, talking about their own attempts to court developers. And then finally, I really recommend looking at the Shopify use case, where they're also now creating collections by default as a way of onboarding developers. One of the things we hear a lot as challenges in large enterprises is you have a new developer join the team. How do they actually understand which APIs exist, how to find them, how to use them? And so Postman is used as a developer training and onboarding tool. So I would say developer experience is really sort of a key theme for a lot of large enterprises. Developers are, fortunately for developers, but also something that organizations pay a lot of attention to, one of the most expensive resources that organizations have. So the more that they can do to make developer onboarding into internal API ecosystems efficient, the higher value that those developers can provide to those organizations more quickly. So developer experience is a key theme. API quality, again, probably not a big surprise here, and the quality community is really some of the deepest users of the Postman platform. And for those of you who might not be familiar, of course, Postman's used from an exploratory testing and a manual testing perspective. But Postman also has really deep integrations with CI platforms through a tool that we have called Newman that allows you to take both the manual testing that you're doing, but also automated tests through Collection Runner that you can create inside Postman and integrate those into your CI pipeline and actually have your API tests be a quality gate before APIs hit production. So we see a lot of organizations now leveraging Postman for automated API testing in their CI pipelines. A couple of really fantastic talks around this topic. Again, I definitely recommend today, I think is Kristen Jakovny talking about the quality infrastructure at Paylocity and how they're using Postman as a part of that, as a part of their infrastructure for achieving high quality in their payment APIs. Kristen also has a course that she has created around Postman, so very knowledgeable both about quality and about Postman. And then if you're interested in a more technical session around API testing, Alan Helton's one of our deepest technical users in the community, deeply focused on automation and an API from design through quality testing. So again, another way to think about integrating Postman capabilities into the entire lifecycle from a quality perspective. So definitely recommend those two sessions as well. The next area, and this is an area that obviously is on everyone's minds. APIs literally hold the keys to organizations' technical and business foundations, and is an area that continues to drive a lot of investment and a lot of concern, very legitimately so, right? Like leaking an API key is obviously a much higher a higher level of breach than some other kinds. So definitely something that gets a ton of attention, and Postman is natively looking at expanding the platform to continue to expand the scope of what we do from a security perspective. So you'll see on the enterprise platform that we have that there's reporting built in within Postman that can show you things like how many of your APIs don't actually have security built in? Those sorts of insights. But at the conference, again, two great partners that I'd love to talk about that have built extended Postman capability and integrated it with their solutions to actually use Postman as a much deeper security scanning and integration testing platform. So I'd highly recommend taking out the sessions from White Hat. Built a fantastic integration that allows you to do vulnerability scanning of APIs, in a combination of a Postman collection and the White Hat platform, and then similarly from Qualys as well. So if your organizations, it's a bit of a rhetorical question, if your organizations care about API security, whether you use Postman for it or not, definitely some interesting insights from these two sessions as well. Next, we'll switch to what's a pretty heavy topic in many of the large organizations that we work with, API governance, and we hear this all the time. That many organizations have been building APIs for a long time, for maybe a decade, and so the typical situation is you have hundreds, if not thousands, of internal APIs, but really not the tooling available to think about how do you drive consistency and standardization. And this really ties back to two topics we just covered. The first topic of developer experience, API governance, part of the value of API governance is in being able to provide a consistent experience across all of these developers that are creating your API. And if, like most organizations, you have lots of different teams creating APIs, they can tend to have very different styles. And so API governance, part of API governance is around how do you actually consistently create APIs so that they provide a great developer experience. The other part of governance is how do you build your APIs so that they're also designed securely with consistent testing frameworks. And so two talks that I'd like to point you to. Kin, who you saw interview just a little while ago, has been thinking about API governance and talking about API governance for the better part of a decade, and has really great insight into not only how you can do it from a tooling perspective, but a lot of the organizational and somewhat political challenges that can come with trying to roll out governance. So if you're part of an API program that is scaled up and governance is a challenge, I think that would be a great place to start. And then another talk from, again, an organization that's at an even larger scale than some of our largest customers. IBM is about as large as it gets, and there's a great talk from Chris about how IBM thinks about governance. Not necessarily a Postman specific talk, but a general discussion about designing APIs and governance at scale. Couple more slides, and then we can get into some more conversation as well. So API integrations, right? At the end of the day, and Abhinav had this great quote when I was speaking to him about a year ago when we actually could meet in person. He mentioned that one of the things about APIs is creating an API is kind of inherently a declaration of an intent to collaborate, right? Like you're building an API so someone can use it, and so that naturally means that APIs are consumed either internally or externally, and so API integrations are
Hey everyone, looks like we lost Sanjeev. I am going to try to connect with him. It looks like Sanjeev may have dropped off. I'll make sure that he has the Wi-Fi password just to make sure that he can reconnect. Probably just a connectivity issue. So while we have a little bit of a break, just be sure any questions that you guys have once Sanjeev has reconnected, feel free to pop those into the Slido tab where you can post Q&A. Feel free to jump in there, myself or Sanjeev when he returns. Assuming that he does, we can follow up and answer some of those questions. So Pete, my cameo was at the very beginning. I jumped on and off. I didn't want to be distracting, throwing up any flexes or hair whips. Mind you, this hair is pretty locked in, so a lot of head bashing. I would say that the music today. Oh, my lenses, why are they yellowish? So I have a thing about blue light from, these actually aren't normal glasses. These are called gunner glasses, a way for you to remove some of the blue light from screens, which allows me to wind down a little bit faster after a long workday. So it kind of removes the blue light from the screen. Great question. These ones are in particular are not prescription. You can get them as prescription if you know what your modifications are. I'm pretty sure either one you can go through your typical formatting. Jonathan has posted a very long URL. I'm not going to click on it, but I'm assuming it has to do with the blue light suppression. I have used Flex before as well. I prefer to use this all day long. And part of the reason why too is to remove a little bit of the device addiction or attachment. So one of the things I actually do during the day is I have an iPhone, completely turn off the color on my screen. So I move it to black and white. So then I'm not so attached to the screen. No exciting screen in modern day era is anything but color. So just some of the little hacks that I've done for myself. One, to kind of help minimize the impact of long screen time. So Gunner glasses, they're not a sponsor, so don't assume there'll be any shout out there. But another option, Flux, is another good tool as well. And as you can see from my lighting, I do have my window here. Tried setting it up when I closed the blinds. It was a little bit too dark, so I'm still messing around with that. Quick note though from the speaker, Sanjeev will be rejoining soon. Hopefully be able to pop through the rest of his slides. Jonathan, context switching and attention fatigue. I completely agree with you on that. I think that's something that I'm looking to manage. One of the things that I do when I need to get into that alpha brain state, I put on some particular music. I actually like this one track on YouTube. It really plays the same song over and over again for an hour. It's called The Gale, which is a song from is a song from sorry, I'm blanking. The Last of the Mohicans, for any of you people who like a good Daniel Day-Lewis movie. So it looks like Sanjeev's computer has gone kaput, he said. So with that, I will ad hoc share my screen and jump in where he left off. Let's see. All right, one moment. Let's see if I can share my screen. Application window. And no, let's present from current slide. All right, sorry. look away if you have any issues with fast-moving screens. So last Sanjeev talked about was some of the API governance happening at IPM. One of the good talks there. Another focus that Postman is really working on, and this is really part of our kind of open perspective around APIs, open source and the strategies around it, obviously, is getting major players to integrate with your tooling and really being able to enable the ecosystem as best as possible. So one of the talks that we'll be having that specifically dig into integration, the DevOps test and automation. So ways to be able to integrate Newman and monitors. I actually believe that he talked a little bit about that already. One of the things that I've noticed, especially in the background that I've had in CI/CD, DevOps, is really seeing that the ecosystem of APIs is moving more into the automation and security, automation and testing, and automation and deployment. So the biggest thing that we want to be able to make sure that you see, we have one of our sponsors, Circle CI. They'll be presenting another group with Farfetch, and I apologize. I don't have this.
I made it back. If people are still there.
Awesome.
Great.
Great.
I am so sorry about that. Apparently my Mac decided to crash. So thank you all so much for hanging out. I thought I would come back to an empty room. Appreciate it.
No. We're all still here. In fact, I actually think the numbers increased since you left. So I'm not sure if there's a correlation there.
I don't know what that means exactly, but we'll go with it. Thank you. Awesome. All right. So we were talking about integrations. I'll just try and pick up where I left off so you guys can head to the next session. Of course, and you can see my screen, yeah, Ian? Yeah, I will assume so.
Yes, I can see your screen. You're good.
Awesome. So a couple of really interesting sessions to look at from an integrations perspective. There's a DevOps test and automation section. I've seen Kevin give that API integrations talk at a PostCon a couple of years ago, and I'm sure it'll be bigger and better this time around. He has some really interesting use cases for Postman as an integration platform. Sue Smith, who's one of our developer educators here at Postman, is always fantastic. So highly recommend that session. And then a couple of sessions tomorrow. I mentioned Postman being used as a part of your API automation lifecycle. And so if you really are interested in that, then using Postman and Newman, which is our command line collection runner, is really a great way to learn about this. So that session from Farfetch will be really interesting from that perspective. And then there's also a fantastic session by Catherine Sue at Uber. So Uber is using Postman actually as a API monitoring platform. So this is part of the Uber Eats team. They do a ton of integrations with their restaurant partners, and Postman's heavily used as a part of that life cycle to allow both partners to monitor the health of the integrations across those. So again, very, from this perspective, a very enterprisey kind of use case. And you put all of that together, and this is really, I think, where we've started to have some really interesting conversations with customers, is that each of these are component capabilities of Postman, and Postman integrated with other tooling in your environment through APIs, through things like Newman. And really what we have are the beginnings of organizations, whether it's using Postman or otherwise, really thinking about first-class tooling across their API lifecycle, and thinking about the API lifecycle as an important area for the company to really have a strategy around. And so, again, a couple of really fantastic talks about, or two organizations that are taking this really, really seriously. There's a talk later today by Sanjeev Karani, who's the head of the platform group over at Kroger. And Kroger is just doing an amazing job of reimagining their entire infrastructure from an API perspective. And then
really quick time check for the group. So we are at the half hour. So just to be clear, we have 5 more minutes in this group. or in this session. So feel free to, once again, ask questions in Slido for everyone's here. So you have another 5 minutes for this session to stay open. So any questions, continue to ask them.
And I'm wrapping up. I'm like one more slide in, so Ian, so we can finish up.
Not a problem. I will be dropping to join move to another session.
I will
so
try.
Thank you all. Thanks, Sanjeev.
Stay out of trouble.
Perfect.
Thank you. So I highly recommend Sanjeev's session, and then if you want some inside English into how Postman builds Postman from an API-first organization perspective, Ankit, who's our co-founder and CTO, will provide really great insight into that. Last thing, there's a whole set of people at Postman in my organization who are really here to help from a solutions engineering perspective, enterprise sales perspective, if you're thinking about broad adoption, and then customer success. Finally, and I'll let you all go. I'll take a look at the questions as well for those of you who are hanging on. Highly recommend you attend some of these key sessions that we walk through. At the end of the day today, I'm hosting a Cosmic Happy Hour. If you want to learn how to make a blood orange bourbon sour, then definitely show up there. And I've also provided a link to that economic benefits report we talked about. Last thing I'll leave you with is if you ever want to continue this conversation about Postman in the enterprise beyond this session, simple enough to remember, just write us at enterprise@postman.com, and we'll have, depending on your interest, we can have solutions engineers or customer success folks have those discussions with you about exploring some of the different use cases that we talked through today. So with apologies for the dead air in between the session here, I think we managed to make it through the slide, and thanks for hanging on. I will hop over to Slido to see if there are any questions. But if you do have questions, would love to hear them now. So I do see a question from Jonathan about how Postman views its relationship with API management systems like Swaggerhoff, Mulesoft, and Apogee. Very complementary. So Postman isn't an API gateway. And in fact, we just launched an early iteration of an integration with Apogee. So you can take APIs within Postman and actually promote them to your gateway. Mulesoft is very much an integration platform. And so we're looking at and thinking about integration points with Mulesoft as well. I would say, Swaggerhub is an area where we do have complementary or overlapping functionality in terms of the API builder in Postman. So, that there is a little bit of an overlap, but for most of the other things mentioned there's definitely some integration points rather than sort of overlap with things like MuleSoft and Apogee. And let's see, I think that's the only question on Slido. And I know we are over time, so absolutely feel free to drop out. I'm going to take a look at the chat. Thanks, Robin, for the note. Question from Mary. Oh, Mary was answering a question. Thanks for the Postman team for pitching in on the chat while I was gone. So anyway, let's wrap it up there. Thank you very much for joining the session. Appreciate your time, and hope you enjoy the rest of the enterprise focus sessions at Galaxy. Thanks all.